Okay, fabulous. So thank you everyone, and good afternoon and good evening, and welcome to this Twimbit immersion on are telcos making a mistake by divesting their data centers. I'm Manoj Menon, MD and founder of Twimbit, and today I have two wonderful guests joining me to have this conversation. And I have with me Inderpreet Kaur, who's my colleague, and she's the research manager in telecommunications. So welcome, Inderpreet.
Hi, Manoj. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And joining us for this conversation today, we have a special guest, Sachin Mittal. Sachin is with DBS. I think many of you have heard Sachin in some of the previous conversations that we have had. And Sachin is going to join us in this conversation because, we have been debating this topic. There seems to be such a huge adoption of public cloud in this region in the last couple of years. The hyperscalers have built significant points of presence in many countries in Asia, and that is also fueling demand for data centers as well. The growth, overall intensity of digitization should also drive demand for data centers. But at the same time, we see that many telecom service providers are divesting their data centers or spinning off them into independent entities. And in order to understand that better, we thought, hey, let's bring together some experts who can drive that conversation. So delighted to have you here. Welcome, Sachin. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Manoj.
Excellent. So maybe we start firstly, first a key question, is firstly overall data centers, isn't that a great growth opportunity, not only here, but globally as well? Sachin, maybe that could be a great starting point to drive this conversation.
Yeah. So every business runs in cycles. Okay. So what you are telling me is definitely true. For the last 5 years, the data center has been a great opportunity. And now we are talking that it is becoming it's a selective opportunity, still a growth opportunity, but for selective segments. So I think retail as a segment has become a slower growth. We are talking of probably mid-single digit growth for retail segment. And for the wholesale, it has become overly dependent on the hyperscalers now. And the reason you mentioned that cloud. So if you look at the top 3 players, there's a 140 billion. 140 billion is the annual run rate of 3 players, growing at more than 40% each year. These guys are telling everyone, why do you need to own IT equipments? You don't need to own IT equipment, not just from cost point of view, because the refreshments and all the software updates they do, they make you very, very competitive. So essentially, if you have lesser need to own IT equipments, you have lesser need for data centers. So I think this is my take, that retail is a slow growth segment, and wholesale is more or less dependent on hyperscalers now.
Correct. So then what percentage of this total demand, in the global data center is, let's say, driven by hyperscalers today? Is there a number? Is there a statistic to it?
I saw a report by Twimbit.
Okay. Yeah.
I think you guys have come with those numbers. If I recall that, that's over 60 to 75% of the wholesale will be governed by hyperscalers, right?
Correct. Yeah,
that's over reliance, right?
Correct. So clearly, the hyperscalers are going to drive a large part of the demand. So what does it, essentially, what does it take to win that demand? Is it that you need specific capabilities to cater to that demand? Are hyperscalers, while they're building some of the capacity themselves, in many cases they're going out and partnering with other third-party companies and leveraging their capacity as well?
Yeah. So if you were to ask me, I will say 3 factors. First is large space in a given location, because they at least need 5 to 10 megawatt minimum for hyperscale capacity. Second is, I think the second is a bit new, but it is a renewable source of power. If you look at and notice the public announcements by AWS, they want to have renewable energy 100% by 2025. For Google and Microsoft, they announced 2030 carbon free. they are under a lot of pressure because these are, power hungry data centers. So renewable source is very important. Third is a regional presence. I don't want to have a separate agreement each and every time with a separate provider in this country. I want to have probably a master agreement, and that agreement allows me to expand the capacity as and when on demand, because cloud demand itself is very volatile. So whenever they need it, they can ramp it fast. I think that regional presence becomes very important. Yeah, three factors.
So three critical factors driving that. So within that context, given that this context that the market demand is driven by the hyperscalers, and the telcos themselves are slowly beginning to adopt public cloud. They are migrating many of their own workloads to the public cloud. So isn't that is that a clear sign that telcos should be looking at divesting their data centers and start working in greater partnerships with these public cloud providers? And is that making this trend of telcos selling and hiving off some of their data center assets in need for capital to fuel their 5G investments?
Exactly. So you are totally right that if you are a small telco in a given country, and you might not succeed in attracting these hyperscalers. So that's a valid point, and it is better for you to use, to divest. Today you can sell your data centers for 20-25 times EV to EBITDA. That's not bad. Telcos trade at below 10 times, 5 to 10 times EV EBITDA. So this is a business for a similar EBITDA, you can get much higher multiple, okay? And you can use that money either for your 5G CAPEX, for your, making your shareholders happy with dividends, or other alternative opportunities, growth opportunities in the telco area. And but if you are a large player with a regional presence, example will be Singtel, they have decided, I have partners in all the countries, I can work with them. And even telco partnership is not important, is not sufficient. In fact, they have gone in partnership with players like Gulf Energy. So you need to have a very I will call it a very dependable renewable source of power. I think that has become extremely critical in the last 1 to 2 years. 5 years back, no one talked about it. Now everyone focuses on renewable energy. Yeah.
And maybe the next question is, we hear, with the growth of 5G, we see that maybe something like edge data centers could become important. And given that, it is likely to be some time away before the big hyperscalers can build edge data centers in every city in, let's say, in many parts of Asia. So isn't that a logical place for the telcos to play and start participating, and building that play rather than exiting the market by selling off their assets?
So it's a valid point, but remember one thing, please, that 2012 or 13 we started with 4G, and even today many developing countries don't have 4G reaching to each and every nook and corner, and that was a very good technology, a very CAPEX efficient technology. And 5G is not even considered a CAPEX efficient technology. It's a good technology from latency point of view, but it's an expensive technology. So we can assume that probably it will take more than 10 years for us to see a lot of 5G around us. But in selective countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, I know they are clearly ahead, but rest of the region will take time. And do you have that luxury of time to wait for another 5-6 years, waiting for those edge data centers and how the technology evolves? So my sense is telcos need that money for that 5G itself, rather than waiting for the play on 5G. Yeah.
So you think it is a logical step for the telcos to aggressively look at, maybe raising some capital, using that capital to invest and build their enterprise capabilities, at the same time maybe forge a better partnership so that you can offload more workloads onto the cloud and in return be a reseller of some of the public cloud services to enterprise customers?
Yeah, this brings to your first point, that how do you work with these cloud players? Because cloud players are managing, I mean, they also need some resellers. They also need people who can build apps on their cloud services. So I think that opportunity is still there and will remain a long-term opportunity for telcos and everyone else. And it's better to focus there.
Correct. You want to comment, Kristen, from what you hear?
Yeah, I mean, if I remove the data centers, or particularly, the edge data centers, given there are so much infrastructures that telcos already have, their central offices, all the POP infrastructure that they have. If we remove that, what else is remaining for a telco in an edge play? Because if you look at the upper stack, a cloud player already has the applications that have to run on top. It already has the platform that has to work in an edge data center. So if telcos today say, I'm going to divest all of this infrastructure, are they hampering their long-term view in the edge compute opportunity? So rather than looking at divesting all of this, should it be even a thought for them to consider maybe carving it into a separate company or a separate entity, but still retaining control of those assets?
It's a good point, and I agree that some telcos will definitely, who don't need so much of capital, they can split the data center business, list it separately if it's sizable. But the condition is it has to be sizable business of decent size so that it can be listed. And many of those telcos don't have such a big data center business. It will be too small to be listed and split as a separate business. So while you're right in terms of intent and the process, the question is not everyone has that size of the business of a data center, and that will be a barrier here. But we should not forget that enterprise business is an opportunity for telcos with or without cloud, because cloud players cannot talk to local enterprises and medium and small enterprises and even the bigger ones in each and every country. These are global players. Okay, so they need someone to talk and ultimately give the end application to the enterprises. That's point number one. Point number two, one of the problem with this whole hyperscalers is that there are only 4 or 5 hyperscalers in the whole world. And if these guys are renting the space from you, will not they dictate you the price? Will not they dictate you how much I'm going to pay you for this megawatt? So this is a concentration of customers, right? And that is a serious issue here. So I will not be very clear. I mean, I think retail is a space. At least there's a diversified customer base. It may not be very high growth opportunity, but at least the customer base is diversified. Here it's a very concentrated customer base. Yeah.
And in many parts of Asia, to be fair, we still do not have hyperscalers having their own data centers and points of presence in many of these markets. So as a result, it will be some time before, so that there is a role for telcos to continue to have. So for example, Philippines today is not served by any of the hyperscalers directly. You have to either opt for a Singapore or one of the other locations. So maybe the strategy will vary based on which country you are in Asia, right? Clearly, markets like India and Australia and Singapore and Indonesia are big markets. But then, as you look at distributing your risk across multiple providers and adopting a multiple cloud, so you would still have some relevance, but maybe you will not be as competitive as the hyperscalers.
Yeah, it's a good point which you brought up just now, supply. So I think in many countries in Southeast Asia, whether Singapore, Hong Kong, partly due to COVID and partly due to regulatory, I think regulators focus on power efficiency. The supply has been a little bit lagging behind. So while demand is probably maybe a bit slower than expected because of the cloud, so is the supply, and that actually means that in the next 2 to 3 years we are not seeing immediate correction of the data center pricing or the leasing rates. So there's no such disbalance as of now because of this COVID issues which hampered the supply.
Correct.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, fabulous. The other question is, as telco, as you know, on one end we are saying telco should partner, maybe become a reseller of some of these hyper scalers. At the same time, you also cover the telcos extensively. You put your buy or sell recommendations on these telcos. The telcos are beginning to, from a high EBITDA margin business, as they get to start reselling a public hyper scalers business, this clearly has implications on their overall margins. So how do you rationalize it, and what is your, what do you expect these telcos to do, as they start addressing these new opportunities which have relatively lower EBITDA margin as compared to the traditional businesses?
Yeah. So actually, you're right. This was an issue 5 years back when telco margins were even higher. So they were so high that anything and every business looked lower margins to them. But now I think telco margins have also, in the last 4 or 5 years, most countries had seen a 4G new entrant, whether big or small, and telco margins have corrected a lot. And now they have come to a level, if you look at the investments, because of the CAPEX involved, right? Even to get that margins of 20-25%, there's a CAPEX to be put into the networks. While all these reseller businesses, they will not require that much of network CAPEX. They will have very low CAPEX. It will be more OPEX, which is factored in the margins, right? The operational manpower expenses. So if you calculate the ROIC, return on invested capital, actually it will be quite similar or even better for these new businesses because they have higher growth profile. So looking at the investments, it doesn't look bad, but that case was not there 5 years back. That I agree.
Correct. Interpret anything else?
I mean, I completely agree with Sachin on the themes of having scale. You really need to have scale to have these business or the data center business run, and as well as you need to have a regional presence, if not a global presence, and that we see why NTT and someone like China Telecom is still successful. They do have their data centers across most of the Asian countries, but yet if we see another trend that is emerging, the primary markets are established, but then there are these new emerging secondary markets. For instance, if we take example of India, recently there was a partnership between Adani Group and Edge Connects, and likewise we see so many developments happening in Indonesia or even in Malaysia. So is that still an indication that there is still some merit even if you are a local player, but you have large enough scale to support that data center business, particularly looking at the Indian market or the secondary markets? Sachin, how do you see that one?
So I think if you are a greenfield operator and you are beginning to focus on edge opportunities today, I think that's fine because you don't have any other businesses to take care of. That is not the case for telcos. Telcos have existing commitments to their shareholders, and so they are in different ball game. So I agree with you that while edge will be small opportunities, it will take time. If you can wait for that time, and and that's a business which has a very small base anyway. So it will look like a good growth opportunity. So it as a greenfield, it's fine, but as a business, as a additional business, it doesn't look that attractive. I think that's the key difference between telcos and someone like Adani. Because if I hear correctly, Adani Group is going for enterprise 5G in India. They actually are. The news, public news, was it 2 days back? Yeah. They are focusing on airways for 5G for enterprise business. So they are focusing on this whole niche of edge plus enterprise 5G. That makes sense. Okay. And the question is how much capacity you have, how much can you invest? So every player will have different capacity and according to the balance sheet.
So if we hear it right, if you have the capacity, to keep these investments going, telcos should still own the data centers. They should.
If you have capacity and scale. So
Yeah.
But
the summary is you have capacity and scale, then you continue to play in it. If you do not have capacity and scale, it's best you partner and get deeper into the relationships and becoming a solution provider.
That's true. That seems to be the key message. But remember that many telcos are merging in many countries because they don't have the capacity for standalone 5G.
Correct.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think pretty much, that summarizes our conversation for today. I don't know, is there anything else, Sachin, you wish to add? Are there other players who, what is your proposition to other players, let's say, who are pure play data center players like Equinix and others, in this region? What is the outlook for companies like them? They can continue to obviously serve the big hyperscalers, and they are becoming a big part of the customer demand for them. Do you see them continue to thrive in this part of the world?
So exactly, that is what has happened, that in the retail space, players like Equinix have differentiated themselves, one because of global size, one because of their interconnect offerings. So I think selectively these are very good players. Equinix stand, these are I would say leagues apart from many other tail players. They will continue to do well. I'm not taking a view on the share price. I don't cover them. How much is priced in, how much is not. That is for the market to understand.
Okay. Yeah. Fabulous. Excellent. I think if there are no other questions, then thank you very much, Sachin. I think your response and outlook is very, very clear. You need scale to compete. You need capacity. While clearly there is a huge opportunity, the business is about serving the large hyperscalers efficiently, because that is where the bulk of the demand in the next couple of years or next 4 or 5 years is going to be. Over a period of time, yes, there will be demand for edge data centers, and you have the capability to ride through the next 5 years without a significant need for capital, then you can continue to play in that space. That's a fairly good summary, Sachin, would you say?
Excellent. Excellent, Manoj.
Okay. Hey, thank you very much, Sachin, and thank you very much, Inderpreet, for that conversation. Appreciate, and if there are other questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be able to respond and support you guys. Have a great rest of the evening.
Yeah. Thanks, Inderpreet. Yeah. Thanks, Manoj.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sachin. Bye.